Today I am truly honored to have Dr. Tony Alessandra on the show. I believe he is one of a kind, someone who truly understands people. I've always admired him since his book on People Smart came out in 1995, and have come to know him as a wonderful person and friend. Welcome to the show, Tony.
Thank you, Joyce. My pleasure.
Tony, when I decided to interview successful people, you were one of the first people I thought of that exemplified success. You have built a highly successful speaking business and 2 successful online companies. Where did it all start, and why did you choose your profession?
Well, I think it started when I was a little kid. A couple of things. Number one, my mother always instilled in me the desire for self-improvement, constantly drilling in me to do better and better. She always told me to go the extra inch. Now, I know a lot of people listening are filled in the blank and said mile, but no, my mother said a mile's too far. She said go the extra inch each and every day in each area of your life, whether it be social, mental, physical, whatever it is, to always try to go an extra inch. So one more push-up a day, physically, one more sit-up a day, walk, an extra 100 yards each day, whatever it is. Mentally, learn a new word each day, read an extra page in a book each day. Spiritually, as opposed to religiously, thank somebody new each day who's sort of been an inspiration or has helped you. Save an extra, dime or quarter or dollar each day. All of those things sort of instilled in me, Joyce, to always seek self-improvement. And even at this stage of my career, many, many years later, and many people, as you mentioned in the intro, seeing me as a success and believing that I have arrived, I'm still in that mentality. I'm still looking for ways to improve each and every day. So that's number one. Number two is growing up, I went to a Catholic grammar school. Actually, I went to Catholic grammar school, high school, and college. But grammar school probably was the big impetus because, maybe every month, and I probably exaggerate a little here, but every month they had the little kids in the school going out selling something, to raise money for the school. One month it was raffles for a car. Next month it was cookies. Next month it was those chocolate bars and so on. And almost every month I would win these contests. And it wasn't just because I have a big Italian family. I actually went door to door and sold. And that instilled in me this belief that I was a good, persuasive salesperson. And then I think third, Joyce, and I'll stop with 3, but there might be more, is reading. And there were a few books that really had a major impact on me early in life. One was called Psycho-Cybernetics by Dr. Maxwell Maltz. And Psycho-Cybernetics...
I've read that. It's great.
It's phenomenal, isn't it? It's fantastic.
Yes,
it's the mechanics of the mind.
It's the kind of book I love to read, absolutely.
Yeah, and the irony is Dr. Maxwell Maltz, who wrote this incredible self-help book, was a plastic surgeon. And he found that when people came to him with low self-esteem, believing it was something physical, he'd fix the physical only to find out that it didn't fix the self-esteem. And so he believed, although he really couldn't do it, other than through his book, he believed that what people really needed was not physical plastic surgery, but mental plastic surgery. And the book, it's a very well-written book with numerous examples. Could you hear my dog barking in the background here?
Hey, he needs to hear the interview.
Yeah, so he's excited. He's excited. He knows about this, too. But anyway, it really is a life-changing book, and I think anybody who has not read it should get a copy of it by Dr. Maxwell Maltz and read it. It is fantastic. So that was one of the books. The second book was called The Magic of Thinking Big with Dr. David Schwartz. Dr. David Schwartz, this was, again, a multi-million seller in terms of positive thinking and, positive image. And it really had an impact on me as a teenager. Now, the irony, talk about, things coming full circle. When I eventually decided to go on for a PhD, I went to Georgia State University, and one of the significant reasons I chose Georgia State University is Dr. David Schwartz was on the faculty in the School of Business, in the Department of Marketing, which was going to be my major, and I called up, talked to him, told him about the impact of his book, and asked him if he would be my doctoral dissertation chairman. He accepted. I went there, and again, that had a whole other impact on me. But those are, oh, by the way, the third and final book, and I say 3 books, there may be more, but these are the 3 that I remember. It was called 30 Days to a More Powerful Vocabulary. And although early on I realized that, I sort of was outgoing and charismatic, I had persuasive skills, and believe it or not, great mathematics skills, but I wasn't a good comprehensive reader, reading for comprehension, and didn't have a great vocabulary. That book helped dramatically. And so those 3 books, plus my mother, plus going out and selling as a little kid in Catholic school, those 3 things, I think, were a major contributor to my success. But here's a key, Joyce. Many people, including you, see all the things that I have accomplished. What you don't see are all the times that I have failed. And I have failed many, many more times than I have succeeded. But my mentality is I'm always up to bat, and I may not hit every pitch, but, in the major leagues in American baseball, if you only hit 1 out of 3, you're going to make the Hall of Fame. So that's what I do. I'm just always up there trying, always up there swinging, missing a lot, but I do hit a lot too. So that's my answer.
That's a great answer. You had great inspiration from these books, from your mom, from your schools, and that's what made you who you are. You cannot succeed unless you keep failing. How do you learn if you don't fail? So
exactly.
I know that from my own experience as well. So on your site, assessmentbusinesscenter.com, we'll say that again at the end of the show, you offer numerous online assessments. How do you believe they help people?
Well, again, it's to me, a self-assessment is sort of looking in the mirror and sort of sizing yourself up. So, when people take, my most popular online assessment is the DISC assessment, which basically is a 4-style behavioral model. D would measure your level of dominance. I, your level of influence. S, your level of steadiness. And C, your level of conscientiousness or cautiousness. So that's one assessment that I have. But I also have I have a motivators assessment. See, the DISC assessment sort of tells you how you do what you do, how you behave. Now, the motivators assessment, which measures what motivates you, why you do what you do. See, one is why you do, one is how you do, and both of them together are an incredible insight into how you behave and how you come across to people. But the motivators measure what you value most. Do you value the economic aspects? Do you value theoretical or the love of knowledge? Do you value altruism or aesthetics or, so there's 7 major motivators. So those are 2 of by far my most popular. But I have a lot of 360 assessments. And let me explain what a 360 is and why it really could affect your behavior and help you improve. I said I love assessments because it's a way that you could look in the mirror and size yourself up, see how you look to yourself. Now, a 360 assessment is after you take the assessment about how you see yourself, you then send out this link to as many people as you want in as many areas of your life. So, for instance, a salesperson would send the link to his or her sales manager, his or her fellow salespeople, and most importantly, his or her customers. And simply asking them, all these three groups, would you answer these questions that I just answered on myself? Would you answer these questions as candidly as possible and as confidentially as possible, because I don't see the answers, your individual answers, I only see aggregate answers. Would you tell me how you think I'm performing in all these various areas of sales? The same thing with a leader. A leader doesn't, their 360 would be to their manager, their peers, and their direct reports, and so on. And what it does is you get to see not only how you think you're coming across with other people, but how they see you coming across. See, when I fill out a questionnaire, I fill out what I think my behavior is, my intentions, how I intend to behave. But when other people complete it, they complete it as they actually interpret or see my behavior. And oftentimes, my intentions or my intended behavior isn't the same impact as it has on these other groups of people. So when I can see that and get the report and see where my strengths are, where people rate me high, see where my weaknesses or struggles are, where people rate me low, I can then focus on those areas where I sort of have a disconnect with those groups of raters. I call them observers or raters. One of the reasons, Joyce, that companies love these kinds of assessments is that most training today, when I first started out as a sales trainer, I would go into a company, I would get all their salespeople, some who were very good and some who were not so good, some who were very good and excelled in some areas but were weak in other areas, and some salespeople in the same company who were very good and were strong in areas where that other group of salespeople were weak, and so on. But I would go in, and most sales trainers do this, most trainers do this, is we go in and we give a one-size-fits-all seminar. We do the same material to everybody. Some people in the audience, when I'm talking about topic A, let's say presentation skills, there are some people in the audience who excel at it and others who are weak. Then when I talk about assuring customer satisfaction, there are other people who excel in it and some people who are weak, but yet everybody gets the same material. With these 360 assessments, I could literally, and I do, target specific material to specific salespeople based on the areas that they are weakest in. So that's why I like assessments. Assessments are simply a way of sort of taking measure of ourselves in whatever area, whether it be our listening or communication skills, our selling skills, our leadership skills, our behavioral skills, and basically telling us how and where we can improve.
There's definitely importance in learning about what other people think of you more than what you think of yourself. Even though we need to love ourselves first before we can love another, I feel it's important to constantly, you might have guessed, that my value is love of knowledge.
Right.
I love to learn, and I'm almost 70. So to me, if you don't learn, when you stop learning, you stop living. Do you agree?
I totally agree. I totally agree. You start backpedaling. Knowledge is increasing at such an incredible rate compared to when you and I were kids. Mm-hmm. It's so much more, so much faster. I wouldn't be surprised from the time you and I were born back in the 40s, and I'm only saying that because you said what your age was.
I know.
But if you look at your photo, you'd never know you were that age.
That's very sweet. But I will tell you that I'm not afraid to say how old I am because I'm proud of it. I'm proud.
Well, you should be because You should be because of the way you look.
Well, I want to be an example for other people, and so I pay it forward by doing lots of things, including the radio show. I love to learn from people. I've learned so much from you, Tony. I've learned that all Ds are not created equal. You can't say because one dominant person treated you one way that all dominant people are going to treat you that way. I've learned so much for you. You don't realize when you're on Facebook and Twitter, there's a lot of trouble with these sites, bots and people that really aren't your friend, but you definitely learn who the person is over time. And
right.
I've learned that about you, and that's why I consider you a friend and asked you to be on the radio today, because I think that this is going to be a very well-listened-to radio show.
Well, I appreciate it. But getting back to what you just said, that all Ds are not created the same. And again, Ds being the dominant, driving, director types, which I am. But again, because I am so versed in this topic and get my assessment and see what other people say about me, I've learned what some of my weaknesses are or were, actually. And I still, I have to be conscious about them. But for instance, I've been told over time that I don't compliment enough. But I think the compliments, I don't verbalize them. So I've been more aware of complimenting more. The same thing with listening. The D styles are not great listeners. So what I do is I've learned to become a better listener. And that's one of the beauties of these assessments. It kind of highlights things you already know, but maybe they're tucked in the back of your mind. But you have to be serious about working on it too. Some people look at it and say, yeah, big deal, my way or the highway. Which is a typical D response, my way or the highway. But again, not all Ds are created equal, and some Ds who may have had that mentality but have that desire of self-improvement look for ways to soften that D or I or S or C approach. So anyway, I'm sorry. Let's get back to what we were talking about.
That's fine. I really enjoy hearing you talk because it makes so much sense. I think that people aren't aware of what they can be in life. Look at little old me. I don't think a lot of people knew who I was before social sites. All of a sudden, there's 500,000+ people following me, and these are real followers. So I don't sell on these sites. I just let people know who I am. There's an awareness now when I go somewhere or hear someone talk, they'll say, oh, I've heard of you. I follow you on Twitter. I mean, it's really, there's such an awareness, and technology is moving so fast. And I know, being born in the 40s like yourself, I do feel that we had a one-button television that rolled into the house at 18. So now you have all these things that you have to learn, and I'm vision impaired, and I learned them. And if I can learn them, anyone can. And so it's very, very difficult for me to understand why someone chooses, and I say the word again, chooses not to learn what their weaknesses are so they could improve themselves.
Very well said.
Thank you. Well, how did you learn to get people to listen, as we've talked about a little bit before, and create excitement in them? We need that excitement.
Well, that's another interesting story. My first real job, other than selling, when I went to college, I sold my way through college. I sold cookware, life insurance, et cetera, and I earned enough to pay all my tuition. My parents only paid my college expenses in my freshman year, never another penny, because between my freshman and sophomore year, I sold cookware door to door. In a 9-week period, earned almost $5,000 in 1966, and from that day forward, paid everything. What was that question again? I sometimes get off track here.
It happens all the time. How to get people to listen and create excitement.
Oh, all right. So, my first real full-time job after getting out of college was a college professor. I was a prof at the university level. I did that 8.5 years, taught marketing And then in 1978, the end of 78, I left the university and went into full-time professional speaking. But the first couple of years, although I did well, it wasn't great. I made much more money than I did as a college prof, but I wasn't burning bridges, so to speak. And because I was doing my presentations like a college prof with a PhD. And then all of a sudden in 1981, one of the premier speakers in the National Speakers Association, the late Bill Gove, he was I believe he was the first president of the National Speakers Association, but Bill Gove took me to the side because he had heard me speak, and he said, Tony, you are a New York City Italian, even though I was living in San Diego at the time, but I grew up in New York City and New Jersey. He said, you're a New York Italian. When you are off stage, you are playful, you are funny, you're mischievous, you make people laugh, you tell stories, but you don't bring that onto the stage. He said, if you allow your natural off-stage style to emerge on stage, you will have a much greater impact in terms of drawing people in, getting them to listen to you, and getting them to do what it is you're asking them to do. And that's what I did. And it was amazing the transformation that had in my impact. And as I got better and better at it, I got more and more speeches at higher and higher fees, but more importantly, got more and more people to follow some of the ideas that I was espousing from the stage. So I think that was one of the things. But I'm a storyteller, and even when I was a kid, particularly when I was in college, because when I went to college, I went to the University of Notre Dame. Now here I was, somebody who almost never, ever in my first 18 years left New York City or New Jersey. I had never been on an airplane. All the people I knew were New York, New Jersey. Then all of a sudden I get plopped into the Midwest, South Bend, Indiana. They even used words that I heard before, but I interpreted them differently. First time I went into a little store to buy a couple of items, that was it, like a little supermarket, maybe 4 or 5 items. Somebody at the checkout counter said, should we put it in a sack? Well, to me, a sack was what you put potatoes in. But to them, it was a bag. And we had this little going, no, I don't want a sack. Just put it in a bag. And we kind of went back and forth. Then I went to a little coffee shop, and I ordered a soda. And they deliver a soda to me with a scoop of ice cream in it. And I said, I didn't order an ice cream. So we went back and forth, back and forth. So anyway, but the key thing was here I was with people from all over the world, not just the country, but the world. And, we would sit around getting to know each other. And the best way that I would get people to know me and know what I experienced in life was to tell them stories about my youth, or as we used to say, my ute. And remember that line from my cousin Vinny, the Utes? Yeah. But anyway, so I would tell stories, and I'd have these people, just enthralled by the stories I was telling. And I realized, I'm a good storyteller. And the more I got people involved, the more I would tell these stories. And, Joyce, as well as I do, it takes a mighty poor speaker not to be able to tell a story better than it actually happened. Sometimes you elaborate a little.
Sure.
You embellish a little because you find out, you get laughs. But, at Notre Dame, I would tell a story to maybe 4 or 5 people. Then all of a sudden those 4 or 5 people would bring other people. Hey, Tony, tell them the story about. And now I'd have 8 or 10 people. Then I'd have 20 people. So I'd be telling these stories. And that's what I do from the platform. From the platform, what I attempt to do is, and this is another sort of a message from Bill Gove, where if you want to make a key point, try to tell a story, and the key point should be sort of the moral of the story or what comes out of the story. So that's what I do. I tell stories. When I want to make a point about the importance, for instance, of collaborative selling, as opposed to more traditional selling, I tell a story of when I sold cookware in a very traditional, manipulative way. And it's a story that is true. It's a story that gets a lot of laughs, but it's a story that has a point. And the same thing, when I tell a story about treating people the way they want to be treated, which I call my platinum rule. I tell a story about my mother. And it's a story that my mother was a classic, stereotypical New York City Italian mother. And so I tell these stories about my mother. I have Joyce, in the National Speakers Association, there are other speakers who have met my mother when she was alive, and they tell stories about my mother because she was that much of a character. She's a great fount of stories. So so that's what I do. That's how I get people interested in what I'm talking about and motivated to want to make tweaks to their behavior.
Well, you're infectious, I'll tell you that. I would like to say two things here. Your background lends itself to your success because anyone who's anywhere in life had to go through failures and disappointments and all types of things. For heaven's sakes, my father was a milkman. So it didn't matter where you came from. You chose to learn how to do what you needed to do it the right way, and you did that by listening. And so because you know how to listen, it's obvious to me how you create excitement in other people to listen.
Well, I agree with you. My father was a New York City cab driver. We lived in the projects of New York, the high-rise, small little apartments, where there were four big, tall buildings in a square with the playground in the middle. That was my background. We didn't own a house until I was a teenager, till I was a freshman in high school. It was always renting. So, I had to drive with the push from my mother, mostly my mother, because my father was always working. My father always had 2 and sometimes 3 different jobs, to keep us alive. Yeah, to take care of us.
Sure.
So
we've had a very similar background. I mean, coming from a family of 7 children and 2 parents, I became a mother at the age of 8 because I had to take care of the other brothers and sisters. And I'm not sorry one bit, because everything that happens to us in life leads us to something bigger and better. And every day I get up excited and saying, what can I do today to make a difference in the world? And I think you do too. Am I right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
let's talk about your platinum rule, because we've heard the golden rule, but what is Tony's platinum rule?
Well, for our listeners, let me just repeat the golden rule. The golden rule is do unto others as you would have them do unto you. In other words, treat people the way you would like to be treated.
Yes.
Now, from a values, from an ethics, from a consideration point of view, it is an incredible rule that I should do unto others as I want done unto myself. However, from a pure one-to-one communication perspective, it can backfire because not everybody wants to be treated the same way as you do. And in a world of increasing diversity, we need to be aware that not everybody's the same. Not everybody is motivated by the same thing. So that's when I came up with the platinum rule. The platinum rule simply being do unto others as they would have you do unto them. In other words, treat people the way they want to be treated. And I got to tell you, I lived that firsthand, lived it with backfiring on me, the golden rule, because when I eventually moved from the East Coast to San Diego, now, Joyce, would you think that the regional culture of San Diego is different than the regional culture of the metropolitan New York, New Jersey area.
Yes, I do.
What do you think?
Dr. Tony? Yes, I do.
Yes, absolutely. However, when I moved to San Diego, I treated the people in San Diego according to the golden rule. In other words, I treated the people in San Diego as if they were New Yorkers. Do you see a problem here?
Absolutely.
I mean, I came on too strong, too fast, too aggressive, too in your face. Even when I asked people to do things that under any other circumstance they would have willingly done, they dug in their heels, decided not to do it.
And it wasn't out of their comfort zone. That's
absolutely,
not what they knew.
Absolutely.
That's not what they knew.
And, you know, it wasn't because of what I was asking them to do. That was reasonable. It was how I was asking them to do it. I just came on too strong, too in your face. And it was then that I realized what worked in New York didn't work in San Diego. You know that old saying, Joyce? When in Rome?
Do as the Romans do.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I had to change my approach.
Well, you know, I think it's brilliant, this platinum rule that you came up with, because there's so many different generational differences between people, and there's so much diversity out there that people want to know. It's sort of like being a child. What can you do for me right now? That's how children feel. Well, adults are just grown-up children, so they want to be treated in a way that they feel they should be treated. And
right.
I want to ask you a question, because I love your approach, your enthusiasm, and the way that you think, so I'd like an answer to this. I would like to know what percentage, if you had to give a percentage, of people that you think would want to be treated a certain way and learn how they want to be treated and then treat them accordingly. What percentage of people could do what you did?
I'm not sure I'm following the question. So,
okay, I'll ask it again a different way, because it was not probably worded correctly. Nothing to do with you. I feel that not too many people, that was the answer I was looking for, would learn how other people want to be treated and then treat them that way. And so I was asking you, how many other Tonys are out there that can actually take in the information, use the information to understand what the person wants you to do, and then do it?
Yeah, okay, now I understand, and that wasn't you, that was me. That gets back to my early comprehension days. But I would say not many.
That's what the answer I thought you would say. I had it written down because I knew you would say that. Kindred
it's
spirits.
Not many.
We are kindred spirits. So I do think that platinum rule is definitely necessary. And if you're listening to this right now, listeners, please go and learn about the platinum rule from Dr. Tony Alessandra, because it is brilliant in my opinion.
Thank you.
You're welcome. In your various books, you identify 4 different behavioral types. We've gone into it a little bit, but give me some examples of these 4 types and what they represent. But also, would you do this for me? Talk about the variations of the DISC, because, for example, I'm an I, high I, but really, when I'm talking to my clients, I'm an S. I am very steady. I am very listening. I'm very focused. I think maybe you could see that now talking to me.
Right.
So can you answer that for our listeners? Because we hear about DISC. It's all over the internet. A lot of people have them. A lot of them are free. There's a difference. I want you to tell them what the difference are after you tell us what they are. Okay.
Well, so let me just give you a quick CNN overview here.
Okay.
Let's start with the Ds. Their key desire is for results, the bottom line, their motto: I want it done right, I want it done now, or better yet, I want it done when? Yesterday. They are great doers, delegators. One of their problem areas is listening. And one of the reasons is they don't have time and they already know the answer. Why listen? But again, bottom line, no nonsense, get to the point people. The I's, their key desire is for fun, excitement, applause, visibility, recognition. And as a result, they talk a lot about their favorite subject, themselves. Right.
But may I add to that, since I score high I on these assessments, I am not wanting recognition. The only person I am in competition with is Joyce. I am not in competition with anybody else, nor do I care what anybody thinks of me. And so would that be a far-off variation from the high I, the typical I?
Well, Well, again, when we talk about D's, I's, S's, and C's, and I'm giving you general descriptions. Remember, you said not all, early on in this conversation, you mentioned not all D's are alike. Well, not all I's are alike either. It could be early on in life, and probably you did say something that at 8 years old you were a mother, and it probably sort of conditioned your I. It softened it. I don't know what your secondary style is. Could be an S. I don't know.
It's an S.
It is an S. All right, good. So that softens the I. Because the S is more amiable, more of a relating type, a nurturing type. And again, because you had to be the mother at 8, you had 6 other siblings. That probably helped form or enhance your secondary S style. So, so that's why you may not come across, as I'm describing, this generalized I. Remember, any one of these behaviors can look at their behavior on a spectrum, okay, on a scale. So you can have an extremely high I that does everything I talk about, maybe even more, and still have somebody who's a high I, but has softened that behavior, whether it's because of their secondary style or because they've learned what some of their behaviors are, and they knew they had to tone them down. But I'll get into that a little bit more after I give the sort of the overview of the 4 styles. So again, the I is one of the things I say is, generally speaking, I's are generally speaking because they have the gift of gab, the power of persuasion. But they do tend to exaggerate a bit. They round things off. And they start a lot of things because they get excited about many things. They start a lot of things but don't necessarily finish them all. Another saying that I use for I's, when all is said and done, more is often said than done. So that's the I. The S, their key desire is for harmony, safety, security, close one-on-one relationships. They're the true one-on-one people, great, sensitive listeners, loyal, reliable, team players. The S stands for steadiness, but they're amiable, relators. They tend to take on a lot. They have a hard time saying no. They don't like to rock the boat. So that's an S style. And the C, the more conscientious, analytical thinking pattern. Their key desire is order, accuracy, precision, perfection. Their motto, everything in its place and a place for everything. They're the great planners, problem solvers, organizers. They're great at creating systems. They're highly inventive. And of all 4 styles, they are arguably the most intellectual. But
you just described my husband.
Yeah, well,
off the chart, steady, off the chart.
Yeah. Well, so those are the 4 styles. And, again, when somebody takes an online DISC assessment, you usually get 2 graphs. You get one graph that's called your natural graph. And your natural graph is sort of your natural behavior, and left to your own, when you don't have to impress anybody, when you're under mild stress possibly even, here's your natural style. And we typically have a dominant pattern. It could be a single pattern. I'm a D, and everything else doesn't really matter. Or it can be like me and you, we have a dominant pattern and a secondary pattern. Now, my dominant pattern is a D. That's my highest pattern. But not so far below that is an I. And that is my ability, to tell stories, to make people laugh, to influence people, and to come across very much as a high I on stage, not as a D. But off stage, I'm more of my D may come across. So I'm a very high D, very high I. The other two, S and C, low. You're a high, a high I, secondary S. But again, those are our natural styles. All right, that's how we behave when nobody's looking. Then there's a second graph that people get, and it's called their adapted style. And the adapted style is what you show to the outside world when you're either trying to impress or influence or work effectively with other people. It's typically how we behave, let's say, at work, maybe in a group, and different patterns may emerge. I've seen people with a high I as their natural style, and as their adapted style, it may be a high S or a high C or even, ironically, a high D. So we see two patterns, the natural pattern, the adapted pattern. You mentioned that this is all over the Internet, which it is. I mean, millions of people, I'm sure millions of people every day, certainly every week, take a DISC assessment. Some of them are free. I'm a little cautious about the free ones. First of all, it doesn't tell you much, and sometimes a little knowledge can be dangerous. Mine, for better or worse, are not free. Some of them, by the way, many of them, most of the ones that you buy online, which are excellent, by the way. Almost any disc that you buy online is going to be good. But the vast majority give you one piece of it. They tell you this is what you're like. This is your behavior. I call that the descriptive report, the descriptive. What I like to do is in my report, 50% of my reports that I send to people are descriptive because that's important. You want to know what you're like, what your strengths are, your struggles, what you look for in work, what motivates you, the do's and don'ts when people communicate with you. Those are all important things. But the second half of my report, which most other reports from other companies do not have, is what I call my prescriptive, my teaching, my learning part of DISC. To me, growing up, one of the best ways I learned, and it actually got me in a lot of trouble with my teachers, is I always challenged my teachers with two questions. Question number one, all right, I hear what you're saying. I don't understand it. Can you simplify it for me? Okay, simplify it. That's what I do. I simplify everything I teach. But then I would say, after they simplified it, okay, I got it, I understand it. Now tell me, how do I use it? So in many of the DISC reports that are descriptive only, including the first half of my report, they are hopefully simplified and you get it. Okay, I get it. I get what I'm like. In fact, almost everybody, with few exceptions, they read the report and they say, how can you know this much about me? Because I agree with it. How do you know this much about me? By just having me answer, these 24 or 30 questions. It's amazing. But let's go to the second half. And the second half is, okay, it's great to understand this concept, to know what it is, to know what DISC is, but how do you use it with other people? How do I use it effectively? How do I use it to actually practice the platinum rule? How do I treat people the way they want and need to be treated? So that's the second part of my report. I show people, here's how you identify whether somebody's a D, I, S, or C without having them take the assessment. You can't say to somebody, hey, before I deal with you, take this assessment. And by the way, you got to pay for it. You don't do that. So how do you do it visually? How do you focus on what they say and what they do, their verbal, vocal, visual behaviors? And then once you can identify whether this person is a D, I, S, or C, how do you talk to them? How do you interact with them in a way that makes them feel comfortable, that makes them feel special? That's what this is all about. So, not all DISC assessments, whether they are free or paid, not all of them are created equal. Some are different, and again, I truly believe, and I've heard from so many people, that the report that we have created is clear and simple, it's understandable, right, and it's practical. Those are the two things I always challenge my teachers with. Can I understand it, and can I use it?
Absolutely. Well, I think the interpretation isn't there when they just take it. You need to have someone to talk to, either in a mentoring or coaching ability. You have to have someone that's going to interpret why and what you said when you took it.
Right. That helps. I mean, many of my resellers, my coaches, my trainers, my consultants that use my version of DISC, they do debriefs. But a lot of people don't get debriefs. So that's why the second half of this report is so critical. It's almost like a written debrief, certainly not as good as a one-on-one coaching debrief, but better than no debrief at all.
Absolutely. I think that the reason why I do one-on-one rather than speak, and I haven't done any speaking for a very long time, unless selective where I really want to go and speak, I feel that one-on-one is so important in the debriefing process. I even made up a little debriefing booklet so that they can get it as I'm explaining it. So I do think that this is something that is so important that you bring up because it's in the interpretation, and that's why you, having understood that, do yours differently.
Right.
So when you have people on a team or customers, how do you identify who they are without having them take any assessment?
All right. Well, so again, and that's one of the key things in my DISC report is what I do is I show them how to make two simple, here's the word, simple,
yes.
Either-or decisions. Is the person coming across more open or guarded? And I show people what verbal, vocal, and visual behaviors to look for and listen for. That's decision one. Is the person coming across more open or guarded? Decision two, is the person coming across more direct or indirect, more assertive, less assertive, faster paced, slower paced? And again, I give them specific behaviors that they should look for and listen for. And once you make those two decisions, open versus guarded, direct versus indirect, it will lead you to one of those four styles. For instance, the D is direct but guarded. The I is direct but open. The S is indirect but open. And the C is indirect and guarded. So it's sort of a process of elimination that you use to determine what somebody's style is.
That's great information. So we all know your behavioral style because we've talked about it before, but I've never met anybody with your behavioral style, and I mean never, that's as good of a listener as you. And I know your mom has something to do with it, that your home life has something to do with it, your job has something to do with it, and certain books had something to do with it. Which one of the four behavioral styles do you think there are variations of most? Is there one that's got more variations than another?
I don't think so. When you say variations, the ability.
What we talked about before about I'm a high I, but I'm a great listener. So
yeah.
even though I don't never stop talking, I find you to be just as much of a talker as I am, and you're a high D. So that's what I'm talking about.
Okay. I think, Joyce, I think it really depends on the individual. Does the individual, whatever their style is, D, I, S, or C, does the individual focus more on the strengths of that style or the weaknesses of that style? Every style has inherent strengths and weaknesses. So the question is, do you focus more, do you play more to your strengths or your weaknesses? That's one. Number two, we can have two different people, one who plays to their strengths, but also works on compensating, improving their weaknesses. You know, so one of the things, as I mentioned earlier, one of the things for me was I realized I was not naturally a good listener. So I had to work on that. And one of the ways I did it, actually, is I did a whole program called The Dynamics of Effective Listening with Nightingale Conant. It was a good seller for them. And I just did a lot of things early on to learn listening, but also to teach it. Even was back in the late 70s, one of the best-selling listening films of all time, won 6 international awards. It was called The Power of Listening by, what was the name of that company? CRM Films, which was a division at the time of Psychology Today. So that's how I became a better listener. I worked on it myself.
You actually answered the question exactly how not only I thought you would, but what I wanted to hear. So thank you. How does the Platinum Rule help in adjusting your selling style to match the customer's buying style?
Well, I'll give you a short answer here. I mean, there really is a much, much, much longer answer, but that's a whole other interview. But so here it is. It basically tells me if I know the customer's style, whether they are a D, I, S, or C, I would know, should I speed up my presentation or slow it down? That's the first little thing.
Okay.
Secondly, do I chit-chat with them and get to know them, develop some rapport first, and then move into the task at hand or the presentation? Or do I get right down to business? So those are the things that I would do. So, for instance, with a D, I want to get right to the point and go quickly. With an I want to schmooze a little with them first before I get down to business, but still move quickly. With the S, I want to get to know them and slow down the pace. Nice, comfortable, patient, relaxed. With the C's, I want to get down to business, get down to the facts, the business at hand, but go slowly, covering all the points in detail.
Excellent answer. I cannot end our interview without thanking you for being such a good friend to me. You have put quotes on my books, friended me on social sites, and are always at the ready to help me. I'm sure you do this for others as well. I highly recommend listeners to look at what you have accomplished and glean all the information they can from you because you're brilliant. I have your Platinum Rule. I know about it, and it's helped my business tremendously. How could our listeners find out how to find your learning resources online so they can dig deeper, and I highly recommend that, into themselves and find out valuable information?
Well, I would say there's 2 places they can go to. The first is my personal website, which is www.alessandra.com, and that's spelled A-L-E, 1 L, A-L-E-S-S, as in Sam, A-N-D-R-A.com. So www.alessandra.com. When you go there, it'll ask you give you three different options. One of the options is products. Another option is virtual training. If you really want to dig into DISC, for instance, go to virtual training, go to the 3 parts, which are the online assessment where you get an incredible report, the virtual training where I literally in a several-part program, walk you through the entire DISC knowledge, and then give you something called the communication coach, where you actually can get bullet points on how to treat people who are a DIS or C in any phase of selling or management or socializing. So that's one way. Go to alessandra.com. The second thing is if you just want to look at the assessments that we have, you can go to assessmentbusinesscenter.com. All one word, no spaces, assessment, singular, assessmentbusinesscenter.com. And again, you have three choices. You simply click on the one to the left that says I want a single assessment, and then look at all the different assessments I have. You'll see that near each assessment name there will be an icon that's a $. That's what you click to buy it. But the next icon would be a red icon, and it would be a sample report. And I really think you should look at these sample reports. You're going to love them, when you read about it. A third option would be the blue question mark. And the blue question mark tells you what the assessment is. It shows you a sample questionnaire. Also, you can see a sample report there. And the fourth column tells you whether that assessment, whatever it is a 360 assessment or not, where you can send it out to other people. So the two places, Joyce, would be alessandra.com, ALESSANDRA, or Assessment Business Center, CENTER, right, .com. So those are the two places I would send people to.
And when people go to the website, once it's up on ImageMaker Inc. Media, they will see those spelled out for them, so they can just click on them and go directly to them. Tony, it's just been a pleasure. Thank you so much for your time and expertise and sharing so much with our listeners on ImageMaker Media.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me as a guest, Joyce.
It's my pleasure. Thank you so much.